Is there a pointer?
There should be.
Good afternoon. Welcome. It seems that the virus is scaring some people. I might also leave back to Helsinki for the time that there is the problem about the virus, and then return later. But we'll see. Well, my subject matter I have called this, entitled my lecture, Ecological Functionalism, Performance and Beauty in Animal Architecture. Well, we tend to humanize animals and naively think that they would live more or less like human beings. The message of my lecture is that hopefully you will agree with me at the end of the lecture. We should rather begin to imagine ourselves living like animals, because their architecture is so far better than ours. This is, by the way, one of the illustrations in the original version of my book, which was published in Finland by Beatrice Potter, the illustrator. And this image cost me much more than any of the animal architecture images. Well, just to start with a few examples of the complexities. We think of insects as being the least of animals, and do not much think about their architecture. This is a nest or dwelling and capture device of a caddisfly larva. It is built of small stones. Here is a tube that leads water inside, and another tube that leads water out. The larva rests in a side chamber at the side, and this is where he has or she has woven a dense net, and the water brings small eatable things, particles, on the net, and the caddisfly larva eats from his own capture net. And this is all done by the tiny animal. Just think of the complexity of the device for an animal the size of your fingernail. The other image is, of course, a familiar image of these cells. When the standardization for a unit of measure was discussed in the middle of 19th century, one of the suggestions was to have the size of the bee's cell as the base for measurement for human beings, which would have been, of course, a very nice thing to be measuring with the measure of bees. And the reason why it was suggested is that the dimensions by which the bees construct their cells is 12 thousandths of a millimeter. So it's almost unbelievable precision. They are all the same. Also in the 19th century, a zoologist specializing in bees asked his mathematician friend to calculate a container which could contain a liquid or substance similar to honey. He didn't say honey. And the mathematician came with a structure of the bee cells. But okay. Well, the mathematician calculated also the angles. They are not all the same. There are two different angles. Then the biologist compared the mathematician's ideal mathematical system with that of the bees, and there were a few degrees difference in the angles. And the biologist thought, well, the bees didn't do their mathematics quite right. A couple of days later, his mathematician friends calls him and says, sorry, I made a mistake in my calculation. And he gave the angles that the bees are using. So their containment is an absolute minimum for storing honey. Well, I show these images just to remind ourselves that we are creating more and more growing trouble for ourselves because we are not occupying the world in an ecologically proper manner. The problems we have today are, of course, result of excessive mobility. We have not evolved through evolution as creatures that fly from one side to the other constantly. Sorry. Well, animals use more or less the same materials that we do in our construction. This is just an example of one of the finest human constructions, the igloo, and then a Lapland rabbit that uses the insulation quality capacity of snow to survive in the cold. This is a more complex example. The image below. That okay, thank you. This lower picture is, of course, you recognize by geodesic dome by Buckminster Fuller. But the above image is by an unknown. Unknown butterfly species where the larva has built a geodesic dome of her own poisonous hair and glued each one of the hairs together. And then she has built a kind of a swing of suspended bed where the animal lies in the case. So, and being poisonous, the case is very well protected from violence from outside. Just a fantastic, fantastically complicated construction. We'll later come to the question, where is the intelligence? Where is that intelligence? And the truth is that the closer we come towards ourselves, human beings, in the zoological world, the worse they are at habitats. For instance, chimpanzees cannot build anything but just a shaky platform in a tree, and then they protect themselves from rain with a couple of leaves. That's what they can do, compared with inventions like this. The animal world is full of such inventions if we just have the patience to find them. Here are just a couple of examples of the architecture of the animal world. I was once talking with Sverre Pen, the Pritzker Prize-winning great architect from Norway, with a glass of wine. And he knew that I had made this exhibition on animal architecture. And he just suddenly said to me, Juhani, the bird nest is absolute functionalism because the bird is not conscious of its death. I think this is a super powerful idea, because the implication is that we absolute functionalism because we are aware of our death. And I think that's a very deep truth. We cannot aim at pure functionalism because we mix other aims into our construction. Aesthetics, aesthetic, metaphysical, social, etc. aims. So the functionalist, pure functional performance aspect, it becomes weak in our own constructions. I have so many pictures that I don't comment on all of them, but these were illustrations for the next quote, which is taken from Gaston Bachelard's The Poetics of Space, which probably all of you have read. I wonder whether you noticed this chapter, which is a quote from Ambroise Paré from 1880 something. The enterprise and skill with which animals make their nests is so efficient that it is not possible to do better. So entirely do they surpass all masons, carpenters, and builders. For there is not a man who could be able to make the house better suited to himself and his children than these little animals built for themselves. This is so true, in fact, that we have the proverb according to which men can do everything else except build a bird's nest. This is an old French proverb. I'll give a personal interlude why I, as an architect, am interested in these things. I spent 5 war years at my farmer grandfather's small farm in central Finland, and I was the only boy within several kilometers of radius, so I had 5.5 years of solitude, and there were no books, nothing, no radio. My entertainment was watching nature and animals. For instance, I could watch these birds build their nest underneath the eave of my grandfather's house, and if there was a knot hole in the board, I could watch it from a 10 centimeter distance. And I wondered when the birds came, swallows, came from a clay pit, which I knew where it was, with water. They came with this piece of clay, wet clay, in their beak. And then before they put it in the construction, they shook their head like that. It took me 30 years to understand what they did. They did the same thing as the vibrator does when we pour concrete. The vibrator takes away the extra water and air. They knew what they were doing. Every now and then, while the harvest was cut, we could find a very cute nest of the harvest mouse. So there was a lot of animal activity. I followed wasps build their nests, and I couldn't figure out at the age of 5 and 6 where they got this paper, because it looked like paper. In fact, it is a kind of paper, and Chinese learned how to make paper 3,000 years ago by watching wasps build their nests. Then a greatest marvel for me were these little houses, like tiny log cabins of the size of my finger, that were moving in the river, in the bottom of the river. I could not figure out what they are. Then in 1976, in a bookshop in New York, I ran into a book by the Nobel Prize-winning ethologist Carl von Frisch on animal architecture. And there I, standing in the bookshop, and I read it there, standing in the bookshop. I realized that these are cases of certain butterflies. And they construct hugely varying structures of whatever they find. But they are like tiny human log constructions in miniature scale. Then there, standing in the bookshop on Manhattan, I decided I'm going to make an exhibition on this subject matter. And when I got home, I wrote a letter to Dr. Carl von Frisch and asked whether he would participate with me in making an exhibition on animal architecture. I received a letter from his secretary, and the message was, Dr. von Frisch is 92 years old, and he doesn't feel that he has the energy to work with me, but he permits you to use all the material he has published, which was, of course, a great tip for me. And so this is the book that finally made me begin to study this subject more seriously. And these are a couple of images of the exhibition in Helsinki. The floor was covered by 4 inches, 10 centimeters of sand, for the reason that being in the very center of the city, I wanted the people to be a little bit disoriented, and I thought that the muscular memory is so strong and ancient that walking on sand would make them forget that they are in the middle of the city, and it worked perfectly. By the way, this is probably the only exhibition so far where I had 16 live animals working on their constructions during the 4 months. 16 animal species, including one species of fish. I had some fear that the newspapers would attack the exhibition because some of the situations of these animals were a bit cruel. For instance, there were side by side a terrarium for ant lions and the other one for ants, and then there was a rope line suspended over the ant lions to another terrarium where the ants had their food. So they had to go and get their food from another terrarium, and every now and then one of them fell down from the string and was eaten by the lions. And I thought this would be accused of cruelty, but the zoologist with whom I collaborated assured me that this is exactly the repetition of the natural situation. There's nothing cruel about it. And the fact is that there were no negative comments on the exhibition. Then architectural marvels. These are just bodies of certain sea animals. These are not constructions, so I have eliminated this aspect away, but it's also fantastic. So just how complex the constructions become. Well, one of the easiest one to understand, of course, are the birds' nests, and particularly weaver nests. But there are also complexities that you do not understand at first sight. The neck through which the bird flies into the nest is constructed so that when a snake tries to climb up this neck, it slips down because the construction expands and makes the snake fall. Then the other image is a young bird, male bird, practicing nest building. The male birds practice nest building for about two years before they dare to make a nest to propose to a female bird. And the female bird either accepts it or doesn't. If it doesn't accept it, the poor guy has to try again. But this is how skill is built into the system. I will speak more about the sexual selection system, which is now a new subject in biological discussion. The image here is a spider that builds its capture tube into the earth, and the spider holds the door, which has a hinge. There is a hinge in the door, as you see, from a door handle like this, and the right-hand side is the door handle. So spiders have a door with a door handle. Here is a ant construction where there are stairs and ramps connecting the floors, and besides, in the outside, there are exit channels away from the nest. The other one shows covered termite roads. They have wide road network, which is in constructed tunnels, simply because termites do not have a skin. They cannot tolerate sun rays for too long. So everything that we see as our invention has been invented by animals. Animals invented, like the scarabee, the wheel, 400 million years ago. It started to roll its food as a ball on the ground. We didn't learn that until fairly recently. The idea that animals would use tools is so alien to us that it's not long ago that humans were defined as tool-making animals. This is an entirely foolish definition, because in a recent study, the researcher has 28 categories of animal tool use, not 28 different ways, 28 categories. So almost everything has also in tools has been invented. This is a human tool, of course, Stone Age carving tool. Here, a chimpanzee uses sticks to catch termites in a termite nest. But this gets more complex. Here is a water animal living in California who takes shells, but he doesn't have a device how to break the shell, so he swims with 2 stones on his breast, and then he takes the shells and breaks them against his own chest with the 2 stones. The other one is a water spider who eats underwater, catches animals' food underwater. But in order not to have to come to the surface so often to breathe oxygen, he has made a diving bell which contains oxygen. Now he can just take a sip of oxygen from this diving bell instead of going up to the surface. Here is a whale. Do you catch what he is doing? He's sailing. On long trips, whales lift up one of the fins and use the wind. The right-hand side image is quite interesting also. There are hawks, particularly in Egypt, who have learned to use fire to catch their rodent food animals. Whenever there has been a careless human group or individual who has left an unfinished open fire, the hawks go and take the burning charcoal, fly above a grassland and drop it in order to cause fire, which drives all the small animals away, and then they catch them. This is the most ingenious animal tool. These are weaver ants who use their own child as the weaving instrument. The adult ants cannot weave, but their early child can process string, as you see here. So the adult animals use their child as a weaving instrument. Just fantastic inventions. The extended phenotype. Richard Dawkins, who is a bit disputed biologist, he has argued very strongly that in zoology, when we classify species, we should also include the constructions of the animals into the definition of the species, because like in the case of the beaver, their water regulation systems and dams are part of their survival system, absolutely necessary. And then he suggests in the same way that opera is part of, it's also an extension of our mental lives. This termite nest, which is about 7 meters tall, is the real marvel of the animal architecture. I will come to it later. This is what Richard Dawkins writes. In a very real sense, the spider's web is a temporary functional extension of her body, a huge extension of the effective catchment area of her predatory organs. Well, I think this is a very useful thought also concerning ourselves and our own constructions. Everything that we build, the highway systems, the airplanes, all of that is part of us. It's part of our extended self. We don't think it that way, but I think we would get into the threshold of thinking ecologically if we did see all of our constructions as our own extensions. Yes, back to the common practice of understanding animals living like ourselves. We better look at what we can learn from the animals and insects. 7 years ago, I participated in Venice in a conference which had the title, "What Can We Learn from Swarming Insects?" This was a conference for mathematicians, biologists, computer scientists, and there were 2 architects. Just think. And this, it is an institution which is called the Institute of Living Technology, funded by EU. So we have an institution with that activity. We are not aware of it. So I think this Institute of Living Technology suggests a direction to which we should all go in our thinking. What happened now? No. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Chinese learned how to make paper 3,000 years ago, watching wasps build their nests. American Indians are suggested to have learned how to make clay bottles and clay objects by watching certain insects, American insects, who built a bottle-like container of clay, and then they lay their eggs in the eggs here. First they catch worms as food for the future child, and then they lay the egg here. This is a container for the egg to develop into a butterfly, and during the life that he or she spends in the bottle, here is food for them. So sorry. Well, I like the red-blue chair, but when you compare it with the comfort of an ordinary bird's nest, this appears quite absurd in the ecological context. Yes, because it exists in the aesthetic context. I will come to the end, back to the issue of aesthetics in animal construction. Sorry. This is what we humans do. This is the same thing done by termites. Termite nest is a structure which can be 7 or 8 meters tall, and it can contain 12 million inhabitants. So one of these is like Manhattan. But at the same time, they are fantastic breathing machines. They are artificial lungs to sustain the entire population. I will come back to that a bit later. Here is the termite nest, which has an outer shell and then a cavity inside, and the nest proper is in the cavity, standing on pilotis. Here is the area where the insects, the termites, live, and then there are the fungus gardens. They live on fungus now, and here are tiny thin veins close to the surface. Now the 12 million or millions of termites raise the temperature, which raises the air pressure. There are branches to maybe about 15 directions. The air presses down into these veins, and when the veins are close to the surface, carbon dioxide is exchanged with oxygen. And at the same time, when the air goes down, it cools down. And then the cool, oxygen-rich air comes underneath the nest and circulates all the time. It's just fantastic. And the oldest termite nest that has been found that still operates as this air conditioning machine is 800 years old. So they have invented something that we do not have yet, although there are attempts in architecture, of course, like Glenn Merkel's work does not rely on mechanical ventilation. Here is a current architectural project which I think unintentionally somehow comes close to the formal language of the termite. Sorry, pressing the wrong. Here is another comparison. A spider web and a beautiful bridge project by SOM, which has never been built. Spider webs have been simulated in given constructions. There is an institute in Stuttgart which was founded by Fry Otto, which studies animal and plant structures, trying to find how these ideas can be used in human construction. There are remarkable similarities between animal and human constructions. This is an African house, bird's nest. Well, this of course is a spider net and human net. Another example, this is Fry Otto's Olympic Stadium. And then when you go into the microscopic scale of animal constructions, it is absolutely mind-boggling what they do. These are high-tech joints of men below, but exactly the same principles and ideas are applied by spiders. And spiders have been doing this for millions of years. The oldest spider that has been found remaining in tree resin is 380 million years old, and it already has weaving organs. They already could make the line and could spin. Sorry. Here again, wars and human constructions. A caddisfly larva construction of maybe 12 millimeters large, and a hut in Africa. Sorry. An early animal or primitive animal human construction and a fish construction. Lessons of animal architecture. The beaver's natural history makes it hard to believe that dam building behavior is not, at the very least, goal-oriented rather than task-directed. This is a suggestion. How is it possible that animals do these fantastic things? The beavers entirely live on the water regulating systems. They build dams to maintain certain water levels. In America, in maybe 50 years ago, the forestry department killed beavers because they felt that beavers damage forests. 20 years later, beavers were flown back by airplanes, trucked from airplanes and helicopters to the rivers, when it was found out that the beaver dam constructions maintained ecological balance, which was disturbed when the beavers were killed away. So these animal things have their role in the ecological balance. Yeah, this is just an example of a weaver bird's nest building, and I remind again that the males practice for quite some time, maybe a couple of years, before they present their nest. Here the young male is practicing the position, how he will present the nest to the female. But this is obviously not the final, but he's already practicing also that theatrical part. Rehearsal and self-organization. Well, we might think that animals can do these things because they are a closed circuit, neural circuit, that they always just repeat the same thing. If a termite nest is covered by plastic, the termites will start to make a hole through the plastic and build these breathing towers for ventilation. This has never occurred in their natural life. There was no plastic sheet to cover the nest. But they react to the change in the condition immediately and know how to survive. Then back to the termite nest. These are two termite nests, both from the west coast of Africa. The first one on the left-hand side is the nest of the termites who live next to the ocean. And the other one is the termites who live in the desert. It's the same species of desert, but if you would begin to study the air conditioning system in their nests, they are based on two different theories of physics. How do the termites living by the sea understand to use one theory of physics, and the others living in the desert use another theory of physics? It seems simpler to account for the feat by supposing that the individual termites have some functional picture of the end result, and from an array of innate motor programs choose the behavior most appropriate in the circumstances to bring the work closer to that goal. This is an attempt to explain how this is possible. Sorry. Well, this is a tiny thing, but amazing. It is a butterfly's case built by the worm. But the worm has already built this door, hinged door, with a thin part here, because as an adult butterfly who comes out of this casing, he doesn't have teeth or any equipment to bite the shell. But in a previous existence as a worm, he already knew that this door is needed later in life. Higher degrees of mental activity are called cognition, which is defined as the act or process of knowing. Cognition can be innate, passive knowledge encoded in an animal's genes and used as instructions for wiring the nervous system to generate particular inborn abilities and specializations. This is a book with the title The Animal Mind. I will then ask, who is the architect in these cases? But first I show you a couple of other rather amazing things. This is an animal living in the sea, and it's called Portuguese man of war. It's not an animal at all. It's a group of animals, hundreds of animals, which live in a community and some of them specialize as the stomach and the system of processing food. Others specialize as the sex organs. They are individuals who specialize as a community. Some specialize as individuals who raise up the how you call it, in a sailing boat, the sail. They sail in the wind, and it's just mind-boggling to think that this is a group of individuals that have in their lifetime specialized into, as it seems, different organs, so that it appears as a singular creature. But it's teamwork. Well, this image is pictures the queen, termite queen, which gives birth to every termite. And she lives all her life locked inside in the center of the termite nest. And only workers come to feed her and bring her water and then take the eggs out. Termites have invented penicillin. They have frequent fights against armies of ants. And in these fights they are wounded, and as we do, if we have wounds, we easily become infected. Each termite carries a piece of a special fungus in his and her mouth, which they swallow when they have been hurt. And when a female termite comes out of the egg and flies away to start a new community, she always remembers to take a piece of that fungus in her mouth, because that will be the health security for the future community. These are just unbelievable things that are being gradually discovered. I read recently an article about the language of trees. This study had found out that trees had a vocabulary of 800 words. They were not, of course, spoken words, they were chemical words. And the researchers even found out that the trees had dialects, in the local dialects in their language. So I'm telling all of this just to suggest that we are at the threshold of really important revelations of the complexity of nature, which we better begin to understand. Well, these are, in the right-hand side picture, are termites. They don't have any protection on their skin, so that's why they have to have an 87 to 96% moisture always around them. Otherwise, they dry, and that is why even the road networks are covered. I'm sorry. These are artworks by a French artist who takes caddisfly larvae and carefully takes away the plant fibers of the animal's case and puts him in an aquarium with gold nuggets and pearls. And insect builds herself a case of gold and pearls. Beautiful things. This doesn't hurt at all the animal, so I think it is all right, because it portrays something to us, and that's aesthetics or questions aesthetics. This is a necklace of a female ape. The female ape had just killed and eaten an animal, a smaller animal, and she ripped the skin and made a necklace and put it on her neck. So there is suggestions that there are aesthetic aspirations in animals, and it is very true. The left-hand side image is of several bird species which, when the mating season comes, the males begin to play with feathers, because that seems to attract the females. This is a mating ritual of flying certain species of flies which mate at night in pitch dark sky. The males would not be visible to the females if they didn't, without a white shining balloon that they carry. The reason why they also have the balloon is that the female is so vicious that she would kill the male before mating. But with the white balloon, the male makes the female interested in the balloon, and long enough that they can mate. Then the Australian bower birds make 2 meters or even 3 meters tall bowers, which are not nests. They are stage sets to attract the female. And the male decorates the bower and the surroundings usually with colors that somehow reflect their own colors. Like here, obviously the bluebird expands his magic with these blue objects. There is now a new interesting biological view, which has been now confirmed by mathematical modeling. Darwin published his book, The Origins of Species, in 1858, and it was immediately accepted around the world in the scientific world. But immediately after he had published his book, Darwin came to the conclusion that his theory doesn't explain all the variations in animal species. Real headache was the peacock's tail. He couldn't figure out how peacock's tail could fit into his theory. And of course it didn't fit into the first theory, but he published the second theory in 1871. The title is The Descent of Man, Autonomous Aesthetic Choice by the Female Sex. Published in 1871. In the Victorian age, this kind of a topic could not be discussed at all. Now scientists have come back to Darwin's second book and modeled mathematically the two evolutionary principles. And when the two principles, the two Darwin books, are put together, that explains all the variations in species, including the peacock's tail. And now the biological understanding is that in the process of selection, there is an autonomous subjective aesthetic choice exercised by females. And this is based on indications of wealth and health or health, health in the male candidate. And there are birds, especially where the males do nothing else during their entire life than practice choral singing in groups of 5 or 6 or 7 and dancing to the females. And then when the mating season comes, a group of 6 or 7 young men come, do their choral singing together and dancing like an opera performance, and then if they have good luck and perform well, the female chooses one of them. The interesting thing is that only the alpha male can have the female. So the 6 other guys, they do this service for the alpha male to get a female. Just astonishing things. These birds even use false perspective. They place objects, colored objects, in front of the bower, and if you look carefully at them, they are they are small in front, and then they become bigger in size, so that it's a false perspective. If the researcher changes their places, when the male comes back, he sees it and puts them back into the right place. Well, I will stop here because the book, my book has just come out by Gustavo Gili. I just showed 2 fantastic examples of economizing in animal spider construction. The spider on the left weaves a small spider net between his legs, and then when he hears the sound of a fly or prey animal, he spreads it like that. The other one has gone even further. He doesn't have a net at all. He has a virtual net. He has one single line with sticky droplets that catch the prey, and when he hears an insect coming, he starts to swing the line around to create a virtual net. Well, I just give one more example. The spider dragline is the strongest material on Earth. It has the tensile strength 3.5 times the tensile strength of steel. And when steel breaks at 3% expansion, the spider line can be expanded over 200% before it breaks. One physicist calculated recently that if we could weave a normal fishing net using a spider drag line, we could catch a jumbo jet with that net in flight. Well, I'll stop here. These were the angles that well, the original version of my book was illustrated by scientific images, whereas the current one is illustrated by a book, engravings in a book published in 1882 by an American priest, Reverend J.G. Woods. It's interesting and remarkable that in 1882 one priest was interested in this subject matter. There have not been so many between him and myself who have been studying this. But that also teaches us the lesson that don't underestimate the value of old books. Usually the deepest ideas are in the old books, primarily for the reason that they are based directly on human observation, whereas today's scientific books are mediated by new instruments, and so they are far away from or distant to our way of thinking. And then also the scientific proofs today, they are mathematicized most of the cases, whereas in the old ages, like here, they were based on human observation, eye observation. Well, maybe there is time for a question or two.
Do I need it, or you can listen to me?
Sorry?
Maybe I need it. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your work, but also for the conference of today. And I had something to say, I don't know, just to talk a little bit about that. When I was looking at the images and also reading the book, I was thinking about this idea of the emergency, like the theory of the emergency, like, and I think there are differences in between how animals make buildings or they construct and we do as humans.
Yes.
And if we check this theory, it says that there is like two ways of understanding the emergency. One is the homopathic and the heteropathic.
Yes.
And the homopathic is that one that is made by the result of the different parts.
Yes.
And I feel humans, or we as architects, sometimes work in that direction. And the result for sure is not magic, because it's just only like a combination of all these different results. But when you see animals' way of doing, and you feel and you appreciate that they work with this heteropathic, which is more like a chemical way of doing. So it's super creative, because they work like mixing empathy but also knowledge. And at the end, the result is really magic. So my question, or what I want probably to talk about, is what's going wrong with the way we teach and the way we do with architecture, that we don't invite people to get into these kind of processes where magic can appear in a way, but also this way of combinations, or the principle, the theory of emergency. Instead of being with this heteropathic combination, it's more linked with this homopathic combination.
Well, I think we teach and think too much intellectually and theoretically. We should go back to processes of making more, both in the practice of profession and also teaching, because the processes of making bring up other mechanisms than the intellectual, rationalized judgment. And this is exactly what animals do. They could hardly be said to have intelligence in the sense we do, or memory, and not to speak of inherited theory, as we have theories of architecture since Vitruvius in books. They don't, but they have already been practicing their art for hundreds of millions of years. I said earlier that spiders are 380 million years old, ants are about 400 million years old, and it is a bit surprising that the animal species that has the largest collective biomass is ants. The overall weight of ants in the world is much higher than the overall weight of all humanity. And this indicates that they are more adaptable creatures. Yes, they are. They live in almost all climatic conditions. They have empires. The largest ant nest extends from here, from Spain to Latvia. One single nest. It's almost like a Roman Empire. It's just, I think all of this is just the beginning of the marvels that we will find in nature. And as you all know, there is now a tendency to use examples of nature in human design and products. I myself have a glass-covered veranda with self-cleaning glass. The self-cleaning glass is a nanotechnology based on these giant lily leaves in gardens, which may be 1 meter in diameter. When you look at water on those leaves, the water always remains as a drop. It doesn't spread on that surface. And that is how this self-washing glass was invented. It has a nano surface which does not permit the water to spread. The water remains as a drop that rolls down the glass and cleans it. Today in traffic planning, in the most complex situations, and traffic systems are being used as models. I have a wasp nest which I brought from Argentina, which is a fabulous object. I brought it in a plastic bag and I have carried it 100 times. Not a single piece has come over. And it has an entry which has a two-way traffic. One way to go out and another way to come in. Yes, you are right. It's a different kind of intelligence. In emerging systems, it is the great number, interacting great number, that creates the, how would I say, invention or newness.
I can't keep seeing, and I don't know if you see that too, or just wanted to sort of ask that sort of relation between animal architecture and sort of human vernacular architecture, anything that we've done until sort of quite recently. And my sort of thinking was that, of course, we are animals and we essentially share most of the genetics, and animal architecture should really practically include our architecture as well. And sort of was thinking, what is actually different? And came to this idea of what Arnold Gehlen said, that humans are Mängelwesen, that
humans are
Mängelwesen, that humans are that our key attribute is that we don't really know anything, that we have to learn everything, and that we can also teach things, and that we have to create this whole artificial world of culture. And so I'm sort of thinking that in vernacular architecture, something very similar happens as happens to evolution in animals. It's sort of a lengthy, time-testing evolution, essentially.
That's a good point, and I have sometimes even written, first suspected myself, that we humans can learn only as individuals, not as groups. That is why every nation in Africa and Asia, for instance, in the scale of industrialization, they go through the same mistakes. One would have expected that the African nations, for instance, would go through or bypass all the phases of early industrialization and the mistakes that were done then. No, they go through all the same mistakes. And my theory is that it is because societies, not to speak of states, have any capacity to learn. Learn is an individual capacity, whereas probably in huge groups of animals it is a collective behavior rather than an individual capacity. We don't know when we meet next, but I have still two lectures on my calendar. We'll see.
Yes, for those who are interested in following Juhani's lecture, there are still 2 more lectures. But if that happens, because now everything is like in suspension, we don't know if we will have university next week. But if we have, it will be on Tuesdays instead of Thursdays. So there's still 2 conferences to next Tuesdays. And the timetable will be at the same, I think so, or at 1. Yeah, I can remember now. But anyway, we changed the day. But still, as I said, we don't know exactly if that would be. Thank you very much, Juhani.
Thank you.